This lesson is over just simplifying rational expressions, and we've done this before, so this is just a review lesson, but we want to make sure we have this skill down before we go into dealing with rational expressions, multiplying, dividing, and subtract, so that we can get to the main goal of this unit, and that's to solve. So today we're just looking at simplifying. And when I'm talking about rational expressions, we see the word ratio in there, and we know a ratio is just a comparison of two things, and it is a quotient of two polynomials. So I have one polynomial up here and one polynomial down here. So for an example of that, you'd have this 2n over n minus 2, or x squared plus 3x minus 10. So we want to be able to work with these so that I can solve these eventually, put an equal sign in there. And when we talk about rational expressions, which is just a fraction, we want it to get it in its simplest form, and when the numerator and the denominator have no common factors. So we think of, when we are looking at fractions, simplifying this, we could write it as in its factors. So what multiplies to be 9 multiplies to be 15. And we're looking at these are common factors. So when we take 3 divided by 3, we just get 1. So in the simplest form, it would be 3/5. There's no common factors left, thus simplest form. And we want to do that same thing with rational expressions, so with variables. Notice though, we are only can simplify factors, not terms, so we can't fix, this is addition. So if I wrote this and solved this out, we know it's 9 over 8. That's what that equals. Can't simplify it. If I do what we commonly want to do, like if I have this, and a lot of people like to do that, and then write 3 over 2. If I did that with this situation, I would get 3/5. And notice that does not equal 9/8. So we want to make sure that we're simplifying factors, not terms. So when we've looked at simplifying, we've looked at monomials, but let's look at when we're simplifying polynomials. So here we can't cross these off because these are terms. Y squared 3y2 are all terms, and y squared minus 2. They're not factors. They're not multiplied. They're added. So I can't just cross them off. But what I can do is I can factor that top. So write that top y squared plus 3y plus 2 into factors, and write the bottom y squared minus 1 into factors. So I would get y plus 2 on the top, y plus 1 when I factor that, so it multiplies to be 2 and adds to be 3 is 2 and 1. And then the bottom is a difference of squares, so we know that factors into y minus 1, y plus 1. So just to recall, we could rewrite this as y squared minus 1, or minus plus 0y equals negative 1. So what multiplies to be negative 1 adds to be 0 is negative 1 and 1, positive 1. So that's how we get that difference of two things squared. So now we want to talk about a little bit about what we can't have y equal, because remember, we can't have a 0 on the bottom, and so we have some variables that we can plug in, but there's a restriction. We can't ever get 0 on there, so we can't have y cannot equal 1 and y cannot equal negative 1, because that would give me a 0 on the bottom. Then we can go ahead and simplify, and notice we are left with y plus 2 and y minus 1, and that's it. We can't go further. You can't cross those y's off. That's your answer. All right, this is working here. Look at another one here. We don't have quadratic equations, so we're going to look for our greatest common factor. And when we're looking at these, we're looking at what's the greatest amount I can factor out of this top and then also this bottom. So if I factor out a 12 on the top, I get y plus 2. And I factor out a 12 on the bottom, I get 4y. Okay, again, we can't have 0 on the bottom, so the variable that I can't have this term ever equal 0, because 0 times 12 is 0. So what can I plug in for y to make that 0 would be 0. So y cannot equal 0. Then our 12's factor out, or simplify, because 12 divided by 12 is 1. And then that's my answer. Okay, one more here. We can factor out an x on the top. So we got to remember all our factoring rules and factor out an x here. And just a hint, I'm going to try to factor out things that we can simplify. So then 2x plus 1 equals 3x plus 2. And what would make this 0 would be 0. So x cannot equal 0 and negative 2/3. All right, I'm going to go ahead and let you finish that up.